once again, and welcome back to Getting to the Top, where we interview transformational leaders about their leadership journey in hopes that we either inspire you on your own leadership journey or you learn something that helps to get you to the next level. So thank you so much. Today, I have none other than a friend and a fun person to hang out with, quite honestly. I have Carina Cockburn. Carina, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Racquel. It's great to be here. My name is Carina Cockburn. I am the country manager for the Inter-American Development Bank in Trinidad and Tobago. Quite a mouthful, but really wonderful organization, the IDB, and I'm very, very proud to represent them here in TNT.
Wonderful. So, I met you what seems like 100 years ago back in Jamaica, where you were doing all sorts of things to inspire young women and young leaders. And so how did you get started? How did you end up here? Tell us about this journey.
Wow, 100 years ago. Wow, it could be 100 years ago. That's true. Because we've lived so much life since we first met. Right. So after returning to Jamaica, after I think I'll start there. Maybe I'll start. Okay, my career started at the Ministry of Finance in Jamaica.
Yes. And that was service that you had to do because you were...
No, not at all. Not at all. I was lucky enough to earn a scholarship to do my graduate studies. So I wasn't bonded in any way.
Okay, so this is the Rhodes Scholarship.
Correct.
So
correct.
Yes, so this is a Rhodes Scholar we're talking to, guys.
So yes, I was lucky enough to go to Oxford University for my graduate studies. But my first degree was at University of the West Indies, Mona campus.
Beautiful.
In my home country of Jamaica. I'm a daughter of Jamaica. And right out of college, right out of my first degree in management studies, it was at the beginning of the downturn in the financial sector in Jamaica. So a very interesting time, but also a very challenging time for people who had deposited a lot of their life savings in the local financial sector. So a pretty challenging time in the economic history of Jamaica.
Yeah.
And so many of the banks which would have hired people like me were winding down their management trainee programs. And so we had to start looking further afield to thinking about where you could go with a management studies degree. And a friend of mine, he's still a pretty close friend, was already working at the Ministry of Finance. I never thought of working with government for some reason, right? It just wasn't in the whole career trajectory or plan.
So what was on the plan? So we're going to stick a pin and we're going to come back to the Ministry of Finance. So what was in the plan? Like, you were a little girl and you decided you were going to be what?
Well, as a little girl, it's funny, someone just asked me that question today. As a little girl, I thought I was going to be a nurse.
Really?
It was so nice, the outfits were all white and neatly pressed. And I thought, yes, this was a way that I was going to really help people. Yeah. And they seemed so kind. And I was going to be a nurse.
Nice.
And then I found out what the actual caregiving process involves.
And you're like, no, that's too tough, no.
And I said, well, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this. Plus, sciences weren't necessarily for me. So as I grew up, I realized that I was going to go into a business career. And so the intention was to go into something in the financial sector. But I never thought that I would be in public service. Never thought of it at all. But of course, in a way, necessity led me to search further fields to begin my career in Kingston, Jamaica. And a friend of mine said, listen, we have vacancies down at the Ministry of Finance. Come and submit your resume and do an interview here. And so actually they were hiring, they're eager to have fresh young graduates out of UWI. And I started at the Ministry of Finance in the domestic debt division. I remember that. I was an economist in the domestic debt division.
We're going to come back to that, because I mean, I think Jamaica is doing some amazing things right now as it relates to debt management, and you know, whether you're still sort of informed by that experience.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, to be honest, in hindsight, the experience gained in government was actually absolutely brilliant and useful for the job I'm doing right now.
Of course,
because in the IDB, you're really an international civil servant. So it's definitely in line with the experience that I started to gain in that role.
Yes. So you come into the Ministry of Finance, all fresh-faced, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. What did your parents think at this point? You know, was this, you know, were they in awe? Were they like, well, we'll see where she ends up? What were they thinking at this point?
Well, they asked me if it's true that you get a glass with Government of Jamaica on it. And I think it's a towel. There's something you get as a first-time civil servant in Jamaica, and I got those things like that.
Okay.
Whatever they heard, the rumors were true.
So you get a glass and a towel.
So we definitely got everything that we thought we were supposed to get when we came in.
Lovely.
You know, but they were open to it. They were open to it. You know, at that time, I wasn't really thinking with an entrepreneurial mindset about starting my own business. You know, this is a thing that happens, I guess, fortunately or unfortunately, out of our school system. The thinking is you're going to come out of school and get a good job.
Yes.
And so, you know, that led me to the Ministry of Finance. And at first, you know, you don't get anything to do, right? So you have a lot of time on your hands. You have time to read the papers cover to cover. Your supervisor is on leave for 6 months. I
cannot imagine you in a role without a lot to do. I feel like you'd have been like, okay, I'm gonna create stuff.
Well, that's exactly what happened. So, you know, we had a few, maybe 2-3 months of like long lunch breaks and really attending meetings to get a sense of how the whole place worked. And sometimes your supervisor is just not there.
Oh, wow.
Right? Because you have long leave.
Yes.
3 months or something. Because a lot of people
build up all kinds of service over time and have to work out that leave. Yeah.
Correct. And then, you know, they give you a few things to do and then they realize, oh, this person, you know, seems to be churning out some stuff. So let's give her a little more. And then eventually you find you really have a lot to do because, you know, the resources are never sufficient in the government service to do everything that needs to be done.
Yes.
So, you know, I was in that role, I would say maybe a year to 2 years. And while I was in that role, I encountered the office of the minister because I would produce this report that had to be taken by the minister to Parliament to report on the domestic debt of the country at the time.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what the debt levels were at that time?
Oh, I can't remember that. I can't remember, but I do know that we kept a very tight monitoring and hold on the amounts, and it was transparent because we used to report on it frequently to the Parliament. So so that was instructive in itself. So having worked on that, I came into contact with the advisor to the Minister of Finance. I'd never met the minister. And she actually got an opportunity to study abroad. And so she had to find her replacement. That's the kind of
Okay.
person the minister was. So he said, you have to find your replacement. And so
Before
she
you're allowed
called
to
me.
go.
Exactly. And so she called me one day and said, would you consider a job like this?
Wow.
And I said, yes, but is it a political job?
Right.
Right. And she
Yeah.
said, no, it's a technical job.
Mhm.
And you should come in and meet with him. And this was Dr. Omar Davies at the time.
Ah, I've met him.
And so you come in, meet with him, and see how it goes.
Yes.
So she arranged the meeting, and I went in to meet with him, and he was all busy. There were people around, and I'm sitting there. So it wasn't like he stopped his work to have an interview with me. Like,
Yes.
this was like in between some other stuff.
Yes.
And he's like signing papers and scribbling, and he's like, okay, yeah. So you think you can do this job? Why do you think you can do this job? And so I'm like, well, yeah, I think I can do this job because, I care about this country.
Oh, wonderful. Such a good answer.
And also, I'm really interested in learning. And I am a person who works very quickly and I can get things done.
Yeah.
So he says, okay, all right. Do you have any questions for me? And I said, yes, is this a political job? Do I have to join the People's National Party to be in this job?
Yes.
And he said, as long as you're a professional, you can work for me.
Okay.
So that was it. That was the interview.
That was it.
I don't know. I don't know what to make of that, but that was the interview. I imagine he trusted Dina. This was her name. Dina Heaven was my predecessor. And I imagine he trusted her.
Right. So she thought you could do it.
Or he liked what he saw in me from this little moment.
Yes. That you were brave and concerned. Brave, passionate, and concerned.
I guess so. And we worked together for many years. I mean,
Wonderful.
He was my first mentor.
Wonderful.
So, and it was just an awesome experience for a young person, for that to be your first job.
Yeah.
And I assisted him with all his travel, all his meetings, several projects. And I mentioned that this was at the moment where the financial sector was entering crisis mode.
Yeah.
And several institutions collapsed. So it really was a remarkable moment to be in that space.
Of course. But even still, like, when we look back now, and it's always, hindsight, yeah? When you look back now, I feel like that period, as tumultuous as it was, it made Jamaica so strong, because you're seeing some of that discipline now, listen, we understand what it is to be on the back foot. We understand what it is to be economically challenged, and we will make sure that we do what we need to do in order to be better on the other side.
No, absolutely. I mean, we learned so much.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that really stood out to me at the time when many of the institutions collapsed, we decided to tour the country. The minister toured the country to speak with all of the depositors and policyholders across the country.
Wow.
In their communities.
Wow. And that's brave, eh?
And we heard a lot of the stories of people putting up their savings, people who had been abroad and returned, invested their savings. And at that time, we didn't have a deposit insurance scheme.
Yeah.
So people really lost everything.
A lot, yeah.
And they didn't speak about losing everything. They spoke about how they got everything.
Yeah.
The nights that they spent working, because Jamaicans work really hard.
Of course.
This is a Caribbean story, right?
Yes,
Caribbean people, you leave your home and you go to another country to really advance.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sacrifice that goes in there. And what it taught me is that at the center of policy and the things we do in public service, it's about people.
Of course.
right?
Yeah.
It's not just numbers on a page where you're adding and subtracting and this doesn't affect anybody. These are people
The stakes are
who
really high.
whose lives
Yeah.
are really being affected.
Yeah.
And I think it awoke in me that kind of sense of civic responsibility,
Yeah.
that these things are important.
Yeah.
And as a public servant, you really have a very important impact on citizens and their lives.
So true. So true. So you mentioned entrepreneurship, and I definitely want to continue to go through. And I do feel like it's different now, where kids coming out of school, they're at least making them far more aware of their options, including entrepreneurship as an option. But I know that you do a lot to support entrepreneurs in Trinidad, and you have been very, very deliberate about that. And so tell me a little bit about what inspires you to do that? Why do you find entrepreneurship so important?
So I think that everyone's contribution to the economy is important.
Yeah.
Having said that, the path to real generational wealth has to do with being an entrepreneur, owning and generating income in your own business.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that.
Yeah.
And actually, when I started with the bank, I know we're jumping ahead a bit over some other career steps, but when I started in the bank, I started in a program called the Multilateral Investment Fund, which is now IDB Lab.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the whole purpose, to invest in small businesses and help them to grow and thrive.
Yeah.
And what I see there is successful economies based on, ingenuity, innovation, and an entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
And without that, even though everyone's role is important, you have public servants, you have private sector, corporate enterprises that employ thousands of people.
Yeah.
You have to have your entrepreneurs for the economy to really leap forward.
Absolutely true. So, all right. So we'll go back now. You're leaving the listeners.
Are we confusing the viewers, Racquel?
Yes, we're confusing the listeners, but this is it. I want to keep you on your toes. You're going to have to keep up. So you leave the Ministry of Finance, and then what's the next role?
Right. So I headed off to Oxford to do a master's in master's in business administration. So this was a whole story in itself, because it was the second year of the MBA, the Oxford MBA, because Oxford is not known for doing MBAs. This was brand new, and actually our classes were in an infirmary.
Okay.
So we were passing, bodies and so on, getting for surgery. That was a whole thing. So anyway.
So look at that. You came full circle, and you almost
got to be a nurse, right? So very close. But anyway, so I headed off, and super, super important experience, right? Just interfacing with people from all around the world. And being part of something which was very new, even for an ancient institution like the University of Oxford. So that was super exciting. So after a year, because those courses are a 12-month program, I still had another year of my scholarship remaining, but I didn't know what I wanted to study. And so I said, well, let me come home and suspend for 2 years. So I put everything on hold. I had my MBA, freshly minted MBA. And, I gave a call to the minister to see, what's going on.
Right.
So he said, well, we just formed an institution that we had been talking about before I left, which was called the Financial Sector Adjustment Company. And this is a company that's going to restructure all of these financial sector institutions that the government took over. And so give the CEO a call and see if, they need anybody over there.
Okay.
So yeah, I came back. FinSAC was just staffing up, so the timing was excellent. And there were so many institutions, several banks, insurance companies. This was at the height of the government bailouts.
Yes.
Of a number of institutions. And so FinSAC, as it was called for short, was formed. And this was another very important institution in the history of Jamaica. Lots of critique about it, whether it should have been done that way or not, but no one really knew what to do because it had never been done.
Right.
And in a sense, FinSAC was modeled after the Resolution Trust organization in the US after a similar crisis.
Yeah.
And that was the approach the government chose to take at the time. So again, just a lot of learning, actually going into some of these institutions and working along with the staff to prepare those entities for private investment again.
Yes. And
having to close down some aspects of the business, or even just to maintain the operations. So I was like a banker sometimes, and then I was a life insurance expert sometimes. And, then I was writing speeches sometimes, and then I was doing forensic investigations sometimes.
Wow.
And in fact, I ended up in a unit at FinSAC, which was called I think it was called the Forensic and Prosecutorial Unit, because there was a whole initiative to pursue these assets, and regain them. So that was just an amazing learning experience again.
Of course.
And I've been really lucky to have those experiences throughout my career. So that was awesome.
Yes. But, I find it really interesting that I find that a lot of places, when they go through a crisis, instead of, they become more closed in because that fear takes over and they're like, oh, we've gone through this hard time. Let's make sure that nothing like this happens again. And I feel like that didn't really happen to Jamaica. There was a lot of learning, but Jamaica remained very open, very, very sort of exciting, very, very open to taking chances. The market remained open. It's an easy place it probably has the best ease of doing business in the Caribbean, easy for people to come in and start a business. And that's really interesting that was the impact, that it didn't cause everyone to close everything down, despite the fact that there was a financial collapse. What would you attribute that to?
Well, I think, speaking for my countrymen and women, it has to do with an appetite that we have. Mm-hmm. Right? A hunger that we have inside to succeed.
Yeah.
And that means taking on more risk.
Yeah.
So I would say there are Jamaicans who have lost fortunes many times
over, yeah.
And people would call it gambling. But I wouldn't say so. It has to do with that desire to move from one generation to the next further. So there's just a desire, it's a generalization, but definitely a desire among Jamaicans really to progress.
Yeah.
And that means that money is just not something to have there
and sit and do
look
nothing.
at it.
Yeah.
But you have to look for opportunities to grow that pie.
Yeah.
And sometimes it means that you may take the risk of loss.
Yeah.
And so yes, that desire remained at an individual level. In terms of a policy level, we have been an open society for a long time. We were used to having investment in bauxite. We were used to having investment in the tourism industry. And this really opened up the financial sector, and there was a liberalized economy, and a push towards liberalization at that time. And so we did see quite a lot of investment at a number of Caribbean institutions coming in. Sagicor came into the insurance sector. And we also saw a number of Trinbagonian companies coming into Jamaica and investing at that time as well, which I think is good. You know, we haven't seen the reverse as much.
Yes.
Now, you know, we're seeing NCB and others coming in, JMMB and others coming here to TT. But at that time, the strongest economy, I would say at the time, would have been Trinidad and Tobago, followed by perhaps Barbados and Bahamas at the time. And many entities did come in and invest. And you know, we couldn't rest on be proud about it and say, oh no, you can't come because you know, you're
everything
not from
is
Jamaica.
For us. Yes.
We had to because the capital influx and the influx of experience and knowledge was required at the time.
Okay, so then you leave FinSAC now, and then where do you go?
Right. This is really now stretching my memory a bit. Actually, I think I went back to the Ministry of Finance for a year because there was a change in the minister's advisor at that time. And we worked on a lot of interesting stuff at that time as well. You know, we were liberalizing the sugar industry and some other very important things with Air Jamaica and things like that, which is no more. But really interesting things. I went back there for a year, and then I went back to do a master's in economic and social history.
Wow.
Which was mainly to write about the FinSAC story. And I wrote it all down. I wrote down everything that I learned in FinSAC. And you know, it was good because it was a record, and other students have come and asked for the dissertation that I wrote and use that information to learn, to feed their own research, you know. So it's been good.
Oh, fantastic. All right. So then how did you end up at IDB?
Right. So coming back to Jamaica again, and let me tell you, Racquel, I had no intention of ever leaving Jamaica. I mean, I love Jamaica. It's my spirit home. I had no intention.
Me too.
No desire to like jump.
Spread wings and go anywhere.
No, I was quite happy. I was fine. So I went back home as I had intended. And I did some work. Oh, I know what happened. The person who was the head of my unit at FinSAC was a Canadian, very experienced insurance manager, was hired out of FinSAC to be the head of Sagicor Life of Jamaica. And so, you know, you put your feelers out. Right. And she said, yes, I need help over here. You know, and we knew each other very well because we had worked together before. And so this began, I think, my definition of myself as a project manager by profession. Because I had a role there called the manager of special projects. Which in a sense is what I had always been doing, right? Because I keep describing all these eclectic type of these activities,
and jumping from one thing to another thing.
Right. Yeah. But I never knew that this is what it was called. Yes. You know, I didn't know that until at the time, you know, I went and did my project management professional certification, and I realized this really, it was a light went on. And then I realized that this is what you're doing. You're really doing project management.
Yes, and all of the things are falling under that umbrella.
Right.
And then,
you know,
and then too, the keeping those relationships and always being willing to sort of reach out to a former boss, that is also serving you very, very well, because it's almost like this unbroken chain. You know, you reach out to Minister of Finance and he's like, wait a minute, they're doing this, and then you're working for
Yeah.
this person, you reach out to her, what's happening there. And so this is how
Yeah.
you're sort of
Absolutely.
climbing the ladder.
Absolutely. I feel like every job has been like that. And just bear in mind, my parents, you know, my father worked for a family-owned business all his career.
What was he doing?
So he was working at National Bakery Company.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a sales manager, and then he rose in the organization to do various things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he wasn't like integrated with the financial sector. And you note, I didn't say my father called somebody and got me a job.
Yes,
like,
yes.
I called because this is like my network. So my parents didn't know any of these people, right?
Right.
So this is like, I'm in a job, and I knew people from these jobs, and then that helps me to my next
right
opportunity.
Yes.
So,
and it's always about working those links and making sure that you're not burning any bridges, and
absolutely.
understanding that this job is going to lead to the next job. So not only do you do it well, but you sort of keep your eyes open as you're doing
absolutely.
the job.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I guess my first foray outside of Jamaica to work came at Sagicor. So I went to Barbados for several months to work on the merger of Life of Barbados and Sagicor. Or Barbados Mutual and Life of Barbados became Sagicor. I think that's what it was. But we had a whole project there. I went to Bahamas to work on the rebranding of the agency there. And I did work in Sagicor, Jamaica as well. And so began to have some Caribbean experience outside of Jamaica. After a while, I thought, let me try to do something else.
Yeah.
And I started to look at opportunities in international development. Actually,
Sure.
a job came up at the Canadian International Development Agency at the time.
But I think that's what happens to a lot of us, is that we get comfortable and complacent in one place. And when we've learned all that there is for us to learn, and we've done all there is for us to do, we still somehow stay. And that is almost the sort of kiss of death of ambition, because it means that, yes, you're comfortable. Yes, you're doing a great job. Yes, you are well appreciated where you are, but you have to realize that if you're thinking about your career and your life in a bigger picture, you have to start thinking about, okay, I'm doing this now. I've learned a lot of stuff here. What's the next challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you have to be a little bit brave, right?
Yes,
because,
yes.
Or
willing to do it scared.
Yes, and also, if you're not where you want to be, then opportunities may come, but you have to step. You have to take a step out for the opportunity to meet you where you are.
Yes, and I think
I did look for that.
I find for me, even when I'm scared, if I think about what is the worst thing that could happen, like, okay, no one's gonna die, so that so we'll eliminate that as a possibility. Okay, so I go for it and I can't do it. Well, then find something else. Yeah, it's just like figuring out, when I ask myself, like, if I'm scared, what is the worst that could happen? And you're like, okay, so skydiving, only 1% of, less than 1% of the people die. Okay, so maybe it's not so dangerous. You know what I mean?
Okay, I'm not doing skydiving.
You're not coming
but
with me? You're not coming with me?
Sorry. No bungee jumping, all that stuff. No.
No, I find bungee jumping nonsensical.
I get the points. I got the points. And I do agree. I think, you definitely want to step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And when you do, that's when you're growing.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable. It has to be. It's uncomfortable in the beginning. You're like, oh, what have I done? And but then you start learning stuff and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a whole new world that I didn't know existed, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I jumped out, I made the leap. And I was actually working on a grant program for strengthening public sector institutions. So we were doing projects with the public sector again. you know, so having gone private sector, this was like an international agency working with the local public sector. And how that job ended is interesting, because I had a change of supervisor, and the new supervisor just did not like me at all.
Oh.
Okay.
How was that possible? How was
I don't
that
know.
possible?
You know, I don't even know how this is possible. But for some reason, you know, that was what it was. And so we just came to the end of the contract, and I didn't ask her to renew it, and she didn't offer. And again, I called some people I'd worked with before.
Yes.
And somebody I'd worked with in the public sector said, you know, IDB is looking for people.
Okay.
IDB is looking for people.
Oh my goodness.
And she sent my resume over to the IDB. And they called me in for an interview. And they said, when can you start? Can you start tomorrow? Can you start next week? And I was like, yeah, I'm free as a bird.
So that must have been a really good interview.
And it was really, it was stressful, because, you know, it's not like I had another job. I didn't have another job lined up. And I only started to ask maybe in the last month, because I was near to the end of the contract, and the new supervisor came maybe 2 months before the end.
Okay.
So I didn't have much time to prepare.
So how long were you without a job in that period?
No time at all. That's what I'm saying. It was like 1 week to the next. Just unbelievable, really. And you know, I mean, I was still doing other things. So all along, you know, the project that we met on, I was doing that project, and I was doing consulting work. So one of the things that I used to do a lot was actually business process reengineering. So one of the things that was in demand, I don't know if it still is, but at that time, was to really map out processes and re-engineer them and redraw those again. And I did a lot of that for a number of companies in Jamaica.
Fabulous.
And there was also a consulting firm where I would support strategic planning in businesses. So I was very busy all the time.
Great.
But my full-time job was left, you know, and I really didn't know what would be next. And here I am in the IDB more than 10 years later. It's just amazing.
Nice. And working through, you know, so what did you start as an IDB?
Right. So I was in the Multilateral Investment Fund in the precursor to IDB Lab.
Okay.
And it was a switch, because I was working with public sector agencies, designing grants for them. And this was now designing grants for the private sector. But again, just an opportunity to work with a number of different entities and design a project which would be fulfilled in a 2 to 3 year period. And you could see the changes, you could see the impact. So again, super exciting time.
So tell me two things. What's the best advice you ever received? And what kind of leader are you?
Right. So the best advice I ever received was after many years, not many years, maybe 3 years at the IDB. My boss asked me to go to Washington, D.C. as the advisor for the Caribbean. And I mentioned I had no intention of leaving Jamaica, right? I was very happy there. No desire to leave. But, you know, this opportunity came. And a friend of mine said, you have to do it because you're too comfortable where you are. And because you're scared, that's why you have to do it. So when you feel that little, you know, the butterflies in your stomach and you're nervous and an opportunity is there, to me, that's the answer should be yes.
That's the sign. That's the
I mean,
sign.
your body might not be telling you yes,
Yes.
but
That thing that feels like fear is excitement.
yeah, and it's fear and excitement,
Yes.
but you won't grow unless you take that leap. You
Yeah.
have to leap.
Wow. And you know, it's so funny. A friend of mine who's at IDB actually in DC posted something almost identical, talking about, you know, she was afraid of flying and she just didn't, you know, she didn't want to leave and go anywhere. And this fear that she was facing turned out to be the best opportunity, just jumping on it. And it's so
Yeah.
funny. So clearly this is
Absolutely.
like, this was a friend of yours, but this is like IDB base, you know?
Yeah, I
Do
guess
it
so.
frightened.
Go in. No matter
Go
how scared
in.
you are, just go for it.
All right. And what kind of leader
And
are you? And I've heard some great stories, but I'd like to hear what you think.
all right. So I have to be honest because I know that some of my team members are gonna tune in and say, okay, huh? What?
I'm like the good fairy. I only
I'm wonderful. And yeah, but I am a very demanding leader. I'm a demanding leader, but I also believe in the concept of servant leadership.
Okay.
So I'm a Scrum Master. So Scrum is an agile project management technique, a framework for project management, and it's based almost completely on the concept of servant leadership. So this is, flat, lots of consultation. People's opinions have equal weight. And my job is to serve you by clearing impediments and empowering you to get the job done.
Okay.
On the other side, I'm going to ask you for a little more than you might otherwise have given if I didn't ask you to go further. I'm always asking for a little bit.
Pushing the envelope.
Or a little bit more. Because I think that often we limit ourselves. We think, okay, wow, there's nothing, I can't.
Yes.
There's nothing I can do. Something happened and there's nothing I can do. Yes, there is something you can do.
There's always something you can do. Yeah. No, I feel you.
The event or whatever it is tomorrow.
Yeah.
And how are we going to do this? And I'll be like, we can do it. We can do it. I'm going to give you everything you need and you're going to do it.
Yes. Fabulous.
And so, I'm demanding, but I'm also a coaching servant leader who makes it possible for those demands to be met.
But I also hear that you're very caring. You're very caring. And so people feel cared for and looked after, and they deeply respect you. Yeah.
I'm glad they're saying that.
Yes. I'm just saying that's what's going through the grapevine right now.
I'm glad they're saying that.
Absolutely.
But honestly, in our team, we really have high standards. We strive for excellence. Yeah. There's a certain IDB feeling, we want this thing to reflect an IDB standard.
Yeah.
And we definitely see ourselves as ambassadors, as leaders in the areas in which we work. And so we try to put that special touch on it. And so that's what the demands are about. It's not really about working late at night and all that, because I don't care about that. Working long hours doesn't matter to me. We agree on something, plus. And then, I give you lots of space.
Yeah.
And try to clear all the blockages and really empower people to perform. And I think I've seen where people who have taken the leap with me work in that way have really grown and thrived.
And surprised themselves, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
You know, like, I never thought that was possible. And then lo and
I
behold,
know.
here I am.
Or they'll say, Carina, I didn't see it, I didn't see it. I didn't see it, but here we are. And then afterwards, you have to take some time for rest and self-care. So, I definitely try when we've done something really intense.
Yes.
We have intense moments, I guess, as there will be in any job.
Yeah.
Where we've just done a big event, for example, last weekend, and I know the team is tired. So this week we're kind of keep things kind of low key.
Yeah.
Especially for those who were leading the charge,
Yeah.
So you need that. You need to give people a chance to rejuvenate, recharge, get some thinking time.
Yeah.
One of the things we've tried, this came from our regional manager at the time.
Yeah.
Is a day called Quiet Wednesdays. I mean, I haven't done it for a while because I keep on having meetings on Wednesday, but we really try to keep a day of the week clear.
Of course. Oh, that's such a good idea.
Just to think and plan.
To do the work. I mean,
do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Meetings, or it's just meetings, morning till night meetings.
Yeah. And then you don't get any time to actually do the work. I love that idea. What was it? I think it was Virgin. They used to have this kind of detox, digital detox, and you had to like specify when you were going to have a digital detox. So you couldn't, not your phone, not your email, not anything. And you just took some time. Yeah. You did anything that allowed you to digitally detox. And it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's wonderful. So we try not to have meetings on that day.
Okay.
And use that time to think, which is super important.
Fabulous. Well, Carina, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you for
sharing. Are we done already? This was so fast.
No, and for sharing your fantastic journey with me and with us. I know that that somebody's going to learn something from this. I certainly did. And I really thank you for sharing this time with us. Thank you so much. And if you haven't already subscribed, please like and subscribe and listen. And, we're following our steady growth. And I'm really excited about the feedback that we've been getting. Thank you so much. If there's something that you'd like to recommend or someone that you'd like to recommend, please do so below. Thank you and goodbye.